Evening. If we could have everybody take their seats, that would be great. Water people like to talk to each other, so thank you for coming early and seeing some of the booths and connecting with your other water leaders in the community. My name is John Leopold. I'm a county supervisor and member of the Santa Cruz County Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO. Several years ago, our LAFCO decided, after many years of discussion, that we'd actually develop a set of water policies for the work that we do as a boundary setting commission. And in the process of that work, we met with water leaders from across the county every other week for 8 months. And we developed a great set of water policy that has been served as a model for other LAFCOs throughout the state. And it had three main parts. It talked about information, what we would need to know and share the information about water, regulation, what we would need to see if people wanted to extend service or annex an area to provide service, and education. We wanted to make sure that the community was well educated about water. And so several months ago, I reached out to Tim Carson from the Regional Water Management Foundation and John Ricker, the County Water Resources Division Director, to talk about how we could have a State of the Water address here in Santa Cruz. Through them, we connected with all the water agencies in Santa Cruz County, and we started looking at the innovative collaborations that are going on and the ways in which people are involved in this water discussion throughout the entire county. We know that as we think about the future, what we know and how we respond to water issues will define who we are as a community. There have already been some well-publicized efforts. People might have read about the Water Supply Advisory Committee in the city of Santa Cruz, the recycling water efforts in Scotts Valley and Watsonville, some of the extraordinary conservation measures and requirements in the Soquel Creek Water District. Those are great efforts, but they only paint a small piece of what's happening in our county. Tonight we hope to share with you a broad range of efforts that's involving every district here in Santa Cruz County. Why do we even need to talk about this? Well, Santa Cruz is on its own when it comes to water. We don't get water from any other place in the state. Most of the water in this community we pull from out of the ground, but we also pull it from streams and rivers. So if we're going to solve our water issues here in Santa Cruz, we're going to do it on our own. And what I've learned as part of this process is no one's trying to just do it on their own. They're reaching out to others in the community to help solve our countywide or community problem. So I want to thank you for being leaders here tonight, leaders in this discussion about water, so you can find out better what's happening in the county, so we can find out what's happening at the state level, and you're going to be helping connect the drops so we can work together on water. I just want to give you a couple of housekeeping things now that you're all seated. The bathrooms are over here to your right, and the water fountains is over here to the left. I hope you brought your container and don't waste any drops of those water. We're going to hear from a couple speakers, and then there'll be a panel, and then there'll be time for you to go visit all the water stations that are here to find out more about some of the innovative work that's going on. We'll be introducing everybody that's up here on the stage, but I want to let you know that joining you as water leaders here tonight, we have a number of elected officials who care deeply about water and are here to find out more and be part of that discussion. I'm proud that two other members of the Santa Cruz County Board of Supervisors, Supervisor Zach Friend and Supervisor Bruce McPherson, are joining us here this evening. Thank you for being here. From the Soquel, they deserve a hand. From the Soquel Creek Water District, Dr. Tom LaHue, Carla Christensen, and Dr. Bruce Jaffe are here. Let's hear it for Soquel Creek. From Central Water District, John Benich, the president of the board, is here. John. From the Scotts Valley Water District, we have Ruth Stiles, the vice president, and Chris Perry. They are here tonight from Scotts Valley. Thank you for being here. It looks like many members. We're going to hopefully not break the Brown Act with the San Lorenzo Valley Water District. Randall Brown, Gene Ratcliffe, Eric Hammer, and Charles Bogman are here this evening. Let's hear it for San Lorenzo. From Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency, Amy Newell is here. I saw Amy earlier. All right. Joining us from the Local Agency Formation Commission, or LAFCO Commission, Roger Anderson, our chair, is here. And the president of the Regional Water Management Foundation, Ralph Miljanich, is here tonight. I saw Ralph earlier, yeah. I hope I didn't butcher your name too badly, Ralph. So, anyway, our first speaker here tonight is John Ricker. John is the Water Resources Director for the County of Santa Cruz. He's a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, and he started his work with the county in 1974, he tells me. But his latest stint started in 1985. So I don't know what the pension laws are on that, but we'll find out. Each year he authors an annual report on water that I've termed our State of the Water report for Santa Cruz. It's a great document. Many water districts get to read it. We tried to make it come alive, and it's sitting on your seats here tonight. But John's going to give us a State of the Water address. So please welcome John Ricker.
Thanks, John, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's great to see such a good-sized turnout. My worst fear was it was going to be pouring rain, which, even though we can use the water, sort of dampens events like this. Just wanted to start out to find out where you get your water from, which watershed of the county. So if you can raise your hands, how many of you get your water from the North Coast Bonnie Doon watershed? Okay. There are probably more of you than that, but how about the San Lorenzo watershed, Santa Margarita groundwater formation? Okay, good. Mid-County, Soquel-Aptos watershed basins. All right, and Pajaro Valley? All right, we need to get that highway working better. How many of you have your own well? Okay, that's great. Well, my job is to give you an overview of water issues in the county in less than 10 minutes. It's a challenging task. I'm only going to be able to cover it briefly. You do have more details in the handout that's on your chair. There's more information at the stations. The handout also has a website where there are links to some of the more detailed reports. So if you want to, you can really dig into it more than we'll be able to cover tonight. Also, while we're doing the station routine, if you've got questions that aren't covered in those stations, I'll be circulating around, and feel free to grab me. First, just some facts about Santa Cruz County water, some of which John already covered. We're the smallest county in the state except for San Francisco, but probably one of the most diverse in many ways. With the exception of a few small water systems up in the summit area, all of our water comes from the rain that falls within our county boundaries, so we're dependent on our local water supplies. We have no one big water agency that takes care of things for us, like the Santa Clara Valley Water District or the Monterey County Water Resources Agency. We have a number of small water agencies that have developed within their own communities over the years, and now are working together to really develop regional solutions. We have a commitment to working together and protecting the environment, protecting water quality, and meeting the environmental needs for water in our county as well as the human needs. We have not had any big new water source come online in this county for over 40 years. Although we've had some improvements, some recycled water developed in Scotts Valley and Watsonville, we haven't had any other big supplemental supply. So we are in a situation of deficit and deficiency. We do have long-term supply deficiencies, and those have been made worse by the recent drought. But when this drought is over, we're still going to have those same deficiencies that we have to deal with. And then climate change on top of that is only going to make matters worse. The USGS has predicted that we may have 30% less groundwater recharge by 2100 than we have right now. So we've got a lot of big challenges in front of us to address our current needs as well as our future needs. One of the key things is, though, that our community is very supportive. The recent drought showed that. We had almost 30% water use reduction almost throughout the county. So the community is really behind this, understands this, and is able to work with the agencies. Some of the key aspects of our overall approach to water resources management: we're very dependent on the natural processes in our watersheds, the capture and infiltration and storage of rainfall, and the slow release of that either into our aquifers or into our streams that we then draw on for water supply. Those same streams supply not just us, but also the coho salmon and the steelhead trout, and maintain those supplies even during dry times and dry years. One of the things we want to do is to seek to mimic and enhance those natural processes for water capture and storage and the slow release to maintain stream flows. We want to protect and augment the functions of our watersheds. We want to make the most efficient use of what we do have through water conservation and through wastewater recycling and reuse as appropriate. As we seek to capture and make more use of the readily available winter stream flows that we haven't tapped as much as we could, we're going to need to continue to work more on improving the water quality, particularly during the winter times through stormwater management, septic system management, flood management, erosion control, and overall watershed management. We also are very interested in protecting our stream corridors, our riparian corridors. They're essential for protecting water quality, for helping us manage the flood flows out of the mountains, and for providing fish habitat. So what are some of our primary accomplishments in the recent years? We've completed a number of important and critical planning efforts. The Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency completed their basin management plan. City of Santa Cruz just recently completed their water supply strategy. Soquel Water District has their community water action plan, and we completed updates to the integrated regional water management plans for the Santa Cruz region and the Pajaro region. Those plans tie it all together, looking at water supply, flood control, water quality, and environmental protection. We also, our board recently adopted a county salmon and steelhead restoration strategy that builds on the restoration recovery plans developed by the federal agencies for these threatened and endangered fish. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act was adopted by the state in 2014. This was a milestone event, probably the biggest event in 100 years of water law within the state. And it gives us the authority to better manage our groundwater basins, but also the responsibility to manage those basins and eliminate overdraft within the next 23 years. We've seen further increases in use of recycled water in both the Watsonville area and the Scotts Valley area. We've completed stormwater infiltration projects where we're capturing stormwater from parking lots and other urban surfaces that used to soak into the ground, that now runs off the paved areas, and we're capturing that, treating it, and putting it back into the ground in Scotts Valley, Santa Cruz, Aptos, and down in the farm fields of the Pajaro Valley. Just the beginning of something that we'll probably see more of and that you'll hear more about a little bit later. The City of Santa Cruz and the San Lorenzo Valley Water District are working on their studies to better understand the needs of fish and how much water we need to leave in the streams to preserve and enhance the fish habitat. And in the meantime, even during the drought, the City of Santa Cruz released significant amounts of water downstream from their diversions, much more than they ever have done previously, to start to recover those fish populations. We've been very successful in water conservation efforts. We reduced our water use from 2013 to 2015 by almost 30%. We got some of the lowest per capita water uses in the state. And even though, even in 2013, our water use was less than it was in 1984, even though we've had a 25% increase in population. So we have done very well at improving our water use efficiency. We've completed interties in the San Lorenzo Valley, Lompico, and Scotts Valley area to enable us to move water among different parts of the systems into different systems to provide greater reliability and eventually allow conjunctive use and more efficient use of both surface and groundwater at different times of the year. The intertie between Santa Cruz and Soquel is in place and about to be turning on the valve and having water move into the Soquel Basin. The Resource Conservation District has completed more than 150 habitat restoration and enhancement projects, working with many different partner agencies and property owners along the way. So we have a lot to celebrate that's accomplished. We have much more to do. We need to finish our feasibility studies. We need to develop our funding sources, both local funding and state funding as it may be available. And we need to continue to work together to implement the projects that have been laid out in these various plans. I just want to conclude by acknowledging that we've recently lost two people that were very critical to water management in this county. Rick Meyer with the Soquel Water District and Karen Christensen with the Resource Conservation District. Karen passed away just last week, one of our strongest and most successful proponents of collaboration. She was the executive director of the RCD for many years and guided it from a small local agency with a budget of $50,000 to a state powerhouse with a budget of $4.5 million, building local projects and helping to set state policy and state programs. She was also one of the founding board members of the Regional Water Management Foundation and really pushed to get all the agencies at the table together through the Integrated Regional Water Management Program. Karen would have really loved this event and would encourage all of us to carry on her good work. Thank you.
Well, it's hard to figure out what you say about our next speaker. Just like myself and the previous speaker, his name is John, but he has done so many things, it's hard to figure out what to say. He's been in public service for 40 years, 23 of those as an elected official. He's been a council member, a mayor, a Cabrillo College trustee, an assembly member, chair of the State Budget Committee, and currently he's Secretary of Natural Resources for the state of California. While he was in the legislature, he did author 82 bills that were signed into law. He established the landmark Sierra Nevada Conservancy, restored community college health services, expanded and clarified state civil rights protections, reformed the state mandate system, and significantly expanded water conservation programs in our state. He tells me that he also started at the County of Santa Cruz in 1974. He's not still there, but maybe we can get him back someday. He is also a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, and I believe in some years before 1974, I think 1972 was when he graduated from UC Santa Cruz, his senior thesis was on water. So he's been thinking about these issues for a long time, and I'm really glad that he was able to take time in his busy schedule to come here to Santa Cruz. Please welcome John Laird.
Thank you very much. It's great to be home. I was in Seattle all day yesterday, and I have twice been to the gas leak in Los Angeles when there was a community meeting last week with 1,500 not totally happy people. It called on every skill I had from chairing the Santa Cruz City Council in the 1980s. And I want to just join. I know that Rick would have been here tonight, and Karen absolutely would have been here. And on my way up to the stage, she would have told me about a grant that I'm supposed to give her, and why we're not exactly doing something the way we should, and certain people that want to meet with me. And I will miss that greatly, because she influenced things here in ways that I think are just a mark in the community. And connecting the drops, I want to just sort of take that as my theme tonight and do it in many ways from my personal experience, but my personal experience makes the connection between what's been going on in Santa Cruz County in water for the last decades now and what we face, and what is going on at the state as well, and how they link and how we can play off of each other. Because as was mentioned by John, and I do have a former college roommate who is here tonight who reminded me what it was like watching me for 5 months do that thesis on the history of water development in California. And there are two takeaways. One is just fun. At the time, it was water politics were being driven by the Central Valley and agriculture and urban Southern California. And you would never think that anybody that might have an environmental orientation and be from the Central Coast could remotely be involved in it, and that has happened. And the message is clearly pay close attention to what you're studying, because you might be in charge of it someday. But the other thing was, as I looked at what was going on in the state, it was really, there were 5 or 6 major projects. While there's over 400 water districts, and a lot of it is decentralized at the local level, anytime we thought we were pushing for water in California, it was to do one big thing. It was hook up the Colorado River, or do the Owens Valley, or do the State Water Project, or do the Central Valley Project, or do flood control in a major way that finally worked with the weirs and bypasses and different things that actually accomplished it in California. There was not this comprehensive look. And so if you go to then, me joining the Santa Cruz City Council, which as hard as it is to believe is 35 years ago this coming fall, when that happened, there was just this nascent movement in Santa Cruz County. Basically what had been happening is it was every district for themselves. Many of them were suing each other. And there were these big projects. Each one of them wanted to do an individual big project, and it wasn't matched at all to how we were planning to grow. And just in the months before I was elected, there had been one huge meeting in the Civic Auditorium with a horseshoe with 36 or 40 elected officials from every water district or city or county in Santa Cruz County, and they were trying to talk about what to do. And we had 2 more of those after I was elected, and what we decided to do is form a region-wide study, a joint powers agreement, and we would look at what water demand was at build-out of every general plan, and we would inventory the sources in Santa Cruz County, and we would match them together. And as hard as that was, we did that over 2 or 3 years, and I think of the 9 organizations that were in, 3 of them had to come in on conditions of settlements of lawsuits. That was sort of what brought them in. And I know there were people, I see Roger Anderson here, who I know was involved in Scotts Valley at the time, and there were quite well, I actually see a row of every former planning staffer from the county in the 1970s and 80s sitting right here. There were lots of people involved in that, and what it really did is it sort of set aside some of the rivalries. It matched what the real genuine demand was with some of the things that were available. And it just sort of moved Santa Cruz County into a little bit more of a cooperative way of looking to water and actually tying it to what our needs were. And yeah, there were some diversions. We had this earthquake and people sort of got off track for a while and some other things. But it really sort of put the county in a new place looking to water. And then you move, and one of the things I had to do is there was this teacher at Harbor High who every year would invite me to speak to 4 or 5 classes about water and how the water system worked. And I finally figured out that if you talked about the storm of '82 and the 9 different Santa Cruz City sources and what happened to each one of them when the storm hit, because it knocked 7 or 8 of them out, that got the kids very interested. And I found it very hard to get people to pay attention. They just wanted the water to come out of the tap. They didn't want to pay very much. They didn't want to know very much. And that has been a struggle. That's why this many people being here tonight about the future of water is good. And then you sort of fast forward. My time in the legislature, there was this gradual change. As John mentioned, I was sort of the person that did water conservation. And when I went into the legislature 15 years ago, water conservation was generally viewed as what environmentalists did to not own up to the fact that they hated dams. And so nobody took the efforts very seriously. And yet, through the decade, that changed. And we did some amazing stuff. The 20% per capita reduction by 2020 bill, which is on track, the state to meet that. The latest generation of low-flow toilets, and the legalization, amazingly, of what were illegal waterless urinals and dual flush toilets, because there'd been a carve-out, a special interest carve-out in California. I did a bill that said you could not get integrated regional water management money to plan for new water unless you had best practices of water conservation in place. We weren't going to pay you to plan new water unless you were using your existing water efficiently. And in many places in the state, there wasn't measurement of agriculture water. So I did a bill that really at least provided an information baseline of what the use was so that you could measure against it if you were really trying to deal with more efficiency in agriculture in the state. And then you look at this administration, and one of the interesting things, and it speaks to where I started, when I said that there was one big thing that was always done, and that's where people thought it was water policy, about 4 or 5 months before we knew we were heading into the 3rd year of the drought, the Secretary of EPA, the Secretary of Ag, and myself put together and issued a California Water Action Plan. It's in English, it's understandable, it's 20 pages, and it basically says this is what we have to do to get to a sustainable water supply in California. We need some more storage, we need effective groundwater management, we need recycling, we need stormwater capture, we need to do wetlands restoration in different places because it's not just good for the environment, it's really important as it fits into water systems. We need to be more efficient with what we do. We need to have conservation as a way of life in California, and we laid this out. And then lo and behold, the water bond comes along, and the water action plan is used as the basis for the water bond. So instead of just doing this collection of earmarks, which had historically been what was done in a water bond, this time it was looking at the goals of the state, matching up pots of money, and making it competitive, not earmarks, but competitive, so that people that actually had a recycling plant ready to go online would be eligible, or regional integrated management, or conservation programs, or a storage project, compete, do it against a goal, and actually produce water or produce savings of water. And so that all of the above strategy is what's in stark contrast to the age-old, just do one project. And yeah, the governor has his own project, which is somewhat controversial, but the issue is right now, we don't have a way to grab extra water after all the environmental needs are met and all the supply needs are met in wet years. We just literally do not have a way in the Delta to reach out and grab that water for storage. And so in the last wet year, 2010, we had 800,000 acre-feet of water flow by after we took what we needed for supply and after we provided water for fish and habitat and other things, and we could not grab it. And so that is part of his motivation, is being able to grab in the wet years to balance for the dry years. And then if you sort of switch back to Santa Cruz County, well, what's changed since 1985 when there was the regional study? Well, the impacts of climate change have changed. So I know for me it's empirical, but in many ways the streams such as the San Lorenzo River that used to flow into May and June flow 3 months earlier. And so if you look at Loch Lomond, which at one point was just sort of a backup to all the streams as they flowed and maybe a little bit of summer supply, in sort of that changing flow level and climate, it moves to a central source of supply. What's changed is people have been much more efficient here. As much as people pillory UCSC, the efficiency on campus is similar to their water. The total amount of water used is the same as 25 or 30 years ago, even though they've added a significant amount of people, because they've done it with efficiency, which is interestingly true of Southern California. They've grown by 4 or 5 million people in the last generation on less water. So they have, by being more efficient, accommodated whatever their growth is in Southern California. Another thing that's changed is fish requirements, that you release water for flows for fish. When Loch Lomond was constructed in the 60s, those weren't in place. The solution I wanted in the 80s was if you lifted Loch Lomond by 5 feet, which at the time would cost about $70 million, you would have everything in place. The watershed was purchased, the distribution system was in place. You could create this extra water, but it would kick in the fish requirements, and actually you'd pay $70 million to get less water for water supply because you were doing that. Now that the fish requirements are kicking in anyway, then it changes the equation about what might work and what you might do to be able to make that. Growth is another thing. There has been some growth in those 30 years. There's been some seawater intrusion and drafting issues that have existed in places. All those are changes that then you have to address. But also, particularly with City of Santa Cruz and their recent process, people are looking much more at all of the above. Like, that's the strategy. It is not one big thing. How do you do many things together in unison to try to make it all happen? And so what's left, what this gets us to, is at the state level and the local level, it's kind of like my job with 19,000 people and $9 billion. If it's going well, it never gets to my desk. I just get all the rest of the stuff. And if it was easy to do in water supply in Santa Cruz County, it was long since done. So the question is how do you take these next steps? And in statewide and in Santa Cruz, some of these conflicts are very much in evidence. Like, the mayor of Los Angeles has said he wants stormwater capture to be a top priority of the city of Los Angeles. And yet, to do that, you need a place to store it. And the groundwater basins in Los Angeles are contaminated, and there needs to be major remediation. And yet, a lot of times people look at the cost of the program as just what it costs to capture and treat the stormwater, not what it costs to store it, but it is all one piece of it. And if you want to do water conservation, which I strongly support, you need an underlying water supply that's solid. If you don't have it, you can't conserve to nothing, so somehow you need at least some stability in the water supply so it makes the conservation work. When I was in the legislature, I used to have these debates with the water director, who's a good friend of mine, and he would always say, we can't conserve our way out of this problem. And I said, you're taking a firm stand against a position nobody has. And it is really something that needs to be understood, is you need to have that kind of underlying supply to make it all work. And, you know, groundwater management, the bill that happened last year was a water action plan thing. I think it came in part because of the drought. I wasn't sure I would live long enough to see it in California, as I was fond of saying. Whenever Texas is ahead of California in an environmental issue, we should scratch our head. And it was, in fact, adopted. Additionally, as I mentioned before, storage doesn't work. unless you have the ability to take the water in the right place and get it to the storage, which is always a big challenge. And on the coast, even though I know that in certain places desal is a big issue, San Diego just opened one of the biggest plants in the world last month, and it works a little more if you're in a larger place where you can deal with the rate shock and a broad portfolio of water. But if you were going to use a sewer outfall to dispose of the brine that you pull out from desal so that it goes back in the ocean in roughly the same salinity at which the water was pulled out to desalinate, it means that you need the wastewater to mix with the brine and get it there. So you almost have to choose between whether you're going to do recycling and whether you're going to do desal in places where that might be an option. And then there is, I think, what I always refer to as the mother of all issues, which is financing. And the public, we had a drought when I was on the city council in the 80s. We did not have a big reserve. People did an excellent job of conserving and then were really irritated that their rates went up. And they were paying more while they were more efficient. They didn't understand the notion of fixed costs. If you have fixed costs, they have to be paid no matter how much water you're using. And we at the time did a reserve to try to even it out. But in California, people are going to have to pay more to get the same because we have aging infrastructure, we have climate change, we have demand. Things could crash and people could pay more to get less, or we could stabilize it and they could pay more to get essentially the same in a more sustainable way. That is a really hard sell to the general public. They just don't understand it. If they pay more, they want more. And they don't get exactly why that happens. So with that, that is sort of the Federal Express overview of what has been happening locally and how it ties to what's happening at the state. And we still have a lot more to do. I know there was a grant made here for integrated regional water management, and that is a key part of the bond, and it's to try to finance local solutions around the state that lessen reliance on some of the big centralized industrial water systems. And I always find, as I travel around the state, stories from Santa Cruz get me through almost any single speaking engagement. And I know the water directors here, when I told the story across the state of there being water school in Santa Cruz, and that if you went over once, you could, and told about the DeCenzo cartoon too, that showed Rosemary outside the water school with the rack and whips and different things inside. Everybody loved it, but I said, that's exactly what you need. You're trying to get people to personalize and take it in themselves in their own use, what they need to do, and if that's what it takes after one thing to get them to understand and change their patterns, then that's a very successful way of going about it. And I think that there is a lot to learn from here in the rest of the state, but there are a lot of things to learn from the rest of the state here, and they really are linked because it's coming together where both have sort of a view of all of the above, that we have to do many different things. And you know, I heard that there is a near Brown Act violation of the Soquel Creek Water District, I think it was here. And one of the interesting things is in the 70s, Santa Cruz was asked by Soquel Creek in some emergency if they would give them an emergency intertie, and Santa Cruz City said no. And then when the storm of '82 happened, and Dominican and part of the east part of Santa Cruz was out in the few days after that storm, Santa Cruz asked Soquel Creek for an emergency supply, and they said yes, and they hooked it up so that wasn't there. And I feel, even 35 years later, obligated to mention it because of what was really bad in that back and forth. But it just shows what kind of cooperation there needs to be and how people need to work together to get this done. And it really takes this kind of involvement, and it really takes talking to your friends and neighbors about this, because people need to to understand, to be able to support the decisions and support people that are going to make the tough decisions to make sure we have a sustainable water future in Santa Cruz. So I appreciate the chance to be here today. And I know after the panel I'll be around if anybody has any questions. I'm very happy that people didn't put a public question period in this right now. And we're going to move right into the next panel discussion before it goes to the tables. And the panel discussion is really about water issues in Santa Cruz County from different experience, agencies, and perspectives to give a flavor of that here. And I'm going to just do a brief bio of the 4 speakers in the order that they're going to speak. They have 3 to 5 minutes, and then we're going to just try to do a little discussion before it breaks up and goes to the table. And we have Perrette Harmon, who's going to be the first speaker in a moment, who's the general manager of the Scotts Valley Water District, has been since July of 2013. Prior to that, she was business manager at the Santa Cruz Water Department, overseeing strategic planning and rate design analysis and many other things. Tim Carson is the program director for the Regional Water Management Foundation, which is a subsidiary of the Santa Cruz Community Foundation. He's worked there since 2008. He has worked over the last 20 years in environmental consulting and environmental education, has a good background. It says Andrew Fisher, but Andy Fisher is a professor of Earth and Planetary Sciences at UCSC, where he's taught and conducted research since 1995. He and his students have done amazing networks of stream gauges and assessing stream losses in surface water, groundwater exchange. They've developed tools to measure infiltration, and he's personally done a lot of work on groundwater management in the Pajaro Valley. And Mary Bannister is the general manager of the Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency. She is, as I think a lot of people are, whether we're saying it or not, a proud banana slug. And she's a state registered geologist and certified engineering geologist with nearly 30 years of experience in engineering geology, hydrology, and resources management, not just in California, but in the very harmonious and non-controversial state of Alaska. So with that, let's begin with Perrette.
Thank you, John. Is that on? Can you hear me? So people who know me know that I tend to wear many hats, and if I'm putting on a hat of a water district manager, I should be talking about potable water. If I put on a hat of a sanitary engineer, I could be talking about many projects that I've been involved in. But I'm not going to. I'm going to take you back to the basics. I'm going to ask you a question. Are you smarter than a 5th grader? Are we smarter? Are we as water managers smarter than a 5th grader? Are we as water users smarter than a 5th grader? And I did not go to a grade school in this country, but I believe by the 5th grade, we all had learned the water cycle. That it's kind of big round thing. It starts with evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff, accumulation of that either in a groundwater basin or in the surface water, and it starts all over. So we know that water is a really precious resource, but it's one of those resources that has never left the Mother Earth or our universe. And the quantity of that has not changed. So it's all around us, and it has been circling around for millions of years. So when we are really proud and we talk about collaborative efforts, we have made some progress. We have done collaborative projects in the county, in the state, in the country. But what I would really challenge all of us to think about is, why do we call water, and we like to put colors on it? There's blue, there's purple, green, white, and they stand for potable, recycled, iceberg, glaciers. It's all the same water. So I think the real collaboration starts when we start thinking about one integrated water design, and use of it. It doesn't matter what shapes it takes in its way, it's still the same water. And until we as individuals or we as water managers can really think about it as the same water in just different shapes or forms in its cycle, I think we're failing. We're failing the current, and we're certainly failing the future of the possibilities.
Thank you. Tim.
Thank you. The Regional Water Management Foundation was created in 2007 as a subsidiary to the Community Foundation, and the purpose of creating that was to support collaborations amongst local agencies and organizations in water resources management. The way that we provide that is by working in partnership with the agencies to pursue grant funding, and we also play a coordinating role in the Integrated Regional Water Management, or IRWM, efforts. So IRWM, as mentioned, is a statewide initiative. It promotes regional self-sufficiency. It involves all aspects of water management, water supply, water quality, wastewater, stormwater, flood management, and watershed restoration, and it does so through a comprehensive and collaborative approach. Many of the challenges that the region is facing aren't confined to the jurisdictional boundaries of any single agency. And the IRWM process brings together the agencies, the organizations, the stakeholders to try to improve that communication, to get a better understanding of the issues, a better understanding of the different perspectives, and a better understanding of the potential opportunities. And that is happening in this region. It's represented by the dozen or so agencies that are at the stations behind you. And I want to recognize those efforts, and I want to thank the staff in particular who are a big part of helping put this effort together. The IRWM plan provides a framework for assessing the current and future needs in the region. It includes the goals, priorities, and strategies, and ways to address those challenges on a regional basis. It also includes a list of projects. The region's initial plan was completed in 2005. In 2007, the region successfully applied for a grant to implement the high priority projects in that plan. There was a $12.5 million implementation grant awarded to the region, and it funded a range of water supply projects, a drinking water treatment facility in Davenport and Aptos, a range of water quality projects, stormwater projects, expanded the recycled water distribution lines in Scotts Valley, and helped to fund about 50 watershed restoration projects in conjunction with the Resource Conservation District. The projects were led by the local agencies, but they were also done on a number of projects with the support of local groups, Coastal Watershed Council, Watsonville Wetlands Watch, Ecology Action, among others. In 2011, the region was awarded a $1 million planning grant to update the plan to reflect the needs of the region, as well as to meet the state's updated standards. That funded 4 technical studies. It funded an update of the groundwater model in Scotts Valley. It funded a groundwater management study in the Aromas and Purisima formations. It funded a hydrologic study in Watsonville sloughs, as well as phase 2 of the county's conjunctive use and aquifer recharge study. Each of those studies featured technical advisory committees that were made up of staff from the other agencies. And I think that's an important part of it as well, because that also helps to build and strengthen those relationships amongst the agencies. The IRWM plan itself, it doesn't supersede local plans. It really builds upon them, but it looks through it through a broader regional perspective in terms of the priorities and strategies. And so the IRWM planning effort, it's really informing as well as informed by the local efforts. And I think there's a recent example of that. The initial IRWM grant funded a county-led study to look at conjunctive use and aquifer recharge. The subsequent IRWM planning grant, and I should mention that the findings of that identified water transfers and in lieu groundwater recharge as one of the recommended options. The subsequent IRWM grant took that analysis further. It looked at the technical, regulatory, and legal aspects of the water exchanges. The City of Santa Cruz took those studies and then built upon them with their own analysis. All of that information informed the broad suite of options that the Water Supply Advisory Committee evaluated over its comprehensive 18-month process. And as mentioned, one of the recommendations of that committee is the in-lieu recharge via the water exchanges. As mentioned, that effort is getting underway. You can learn more about that at the Intertie station this evening. But what I hope you take from that is there's this beneficial dynamic between those efforts. IRWM itself, it's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all of the regional water issues that face us. But over the past decade, it has proved to be an effective way to get projects done. And equally important, it's strengthened those partnerships and put in place the broad framework to address the pressing issues that are still facing the region.
Thank you, Tim. Andy.
Thanks. I'm going to play off a couple of things that I've heard already. We heard a bit about changing climate and the effect that that's having on our water resources. We can already see in the record of rainfall that on average in a year we're getting about the same amount of rain, but more of it's falling during a shorter time period. Storms are becoming more intense. And the record shows it. It's not a model, it's not a prediction, it's actually in the data. Well, the big implication for that for stream flows is these peakier, flashier flows, the loss of spring flows, and for groundwater, it's expressed as a loss of recharge. You add on just increased demand because of population growth, development, and changes to land use, and we need to put more water in the ground, not to build a buffer for drought, which we need, but just to break even, just to get back to the resilience that the systems used to have. We need to increase the flow of water. And I'd point out that this is a hydrologic system service. There's a benefit in having water move through aquifers, having water move through streams is itself a benefit. Keeping the system flushed out, keeping the system moving, diluting the salt. We all have heard about the effects of over-extraction of groundwater when too much is taken out relative to what's going in. I'm not going to review those, but I'll just note that there's a variety of impacts in different places in the Monterey Bay region and different parts of Santa Cruz County. Different issues affect different areas. But what's really special about this region, we have incredibly high-value agriculture, innovative thinking, new tools, new ideas that are being developed. You've heard about some of the new thinking that's occurred over the last few decades. And the cooperation. It's incredibly important and really is unique to this area. I've visited other parts of the state, and I've just never seen the level of cooperative thinking and action that you see in the Monterey Bay region, and particularly in Santa Cruz County. In the Pajaro Valley, the Community Water Dialogue is a really important example of that, a grassroots group that's really tried to find ways to cooperate and ways to find solutions. Many of us have had experience working with the different groups in this area. For me personally, it's been, I started to make a list earlier and it's just too long. It's the RCD, it's the county, it's the different water agencies, municipalities, serving on tax, getting advice, getting data, providing data back. And that's just the way things work around here. And that's going to be the key to getting more water in the ground. I've been working at through something called the Recharge Initiative, which we started about 9 years ago. It has a variety of goals to map out the places where recharge can occur and be enhanced, to find the places where stormwater runoff is generated, to help to identify project sites, to design them, to raise the funding, to work with stakeholders to get them put in, to sample, to monitor, to document the benefit, and to help get the word out and learn ourselves about how to do better. And it's been exciting to see in the last decade just how many changes have taken place. The new groundwater legislation, I never thought I'd see it in my lifetime in California, and it's absolutely an amazing opportunity, but it requires cooperation. It takes the requirement to manage water, passes it down to the local areas, which then have to cooperate in order to make that work. And again, that's why we're we're so well poised. It's not going to be enough to just balance the inflows and outflows. We have to recharge our groundwater systems. We have to make up for the deficits that have accumulated over time and build the buffer. So when the dry periods come, and they will, we'll be better able to manage those. And my vision in developing these projects is hopefully in not too long, we'll have a website cooperatively managed around the county with all these projects on it. And when it's raining, we'll be able to go to that site and see little arrows pointing up and down telling us how much we're recharging today. What are the flows here? What's happening at the treatment plant? How can we all be engaged together? Because I think that kind of connection with our water systems is empowering, and it can snowball. It also helps to build support for other kinds of projects. I know we're going to find solutions because the problem is too important to not find a solution. The requirement is so great that we're going to figure this out. And I'm humbled and pleased to be able to work and cooperate within this region, and appreciate your time and look forward to the discussion later tonight.
Thank you. Mary?
Thank you. I'm really thrilled to be here representing South County. Pajaro Valley Water Management Agency is actually about half in southern Santa Cruz County and half in northern Monterey County. We were formed as a state special district in 1984 under the kind of leadership of Senator Henry Mello. And we were formed to maintain local control of 19,000 acre-feet of CVP entitlement from the San Luis Reservoir. As Supervisor Leopold mentioned, we in the Central Coast are isolated from the state and federal projects, but there was a time when we had an entitlement to receive some of that San Luis water. We were given a statutory authority as a state special water district to manage groundwater in the Pajaro Valley, which was pretty unique in the state. I think even today there's only 15 legislatively enacted special districts that manage groundwater, Santa Clara Valley Water District being another one. And at the time, I'd like to say we were mavericks, but that's probably not the right word. You can imagine the Pajaro Valley being largely ag. They're a little bit more conservative than I think the flavor in this room. And now we're going to come in and tell them how to, we're going to limit the groundwater that they pump. We were not very popular at the time. Overdraft was documented in the Pajaro Valley as far back as 1953, and as the crops down there converted from lesser water users such as apples to strawberries, bushberries, our favorite Brussels sprouts, and raspberries and what have you, the increased pumping depleted the groundwater significantly more, and we have seawater intrusion now as much as 3 miles inland down there. We had a board in 1994 that did something novel and fairly gutsy, and the 3 points I'm going to make have a lot to do with having public servants that have guts, I think. What they did was required that all of the big ag pumpers put meters on their wells. And that was unprecedented in the state, and recently continues to be unprecedented. But I was at a meeting in December. The head of the State Farm Bureau even now is saying we can't manage something that we're not measuring. We have to get meters on the big wells. And I'm not talking about the people here who raise their hands about what we call de minimis in the legislation, the little wells. Those are not the problem in the Pajaro Valley. It's the big ag pumpers who pump 85% of the water down there. We don't meter the small wells, the rural residential wells. The metering created, mayhem down there, and the lawsuits started flying. And not only did we meter, but we started charging people for pumping water out of their own wells. And again, not a real liberal group. You can imagine what turmoil this caused. People are, as you all know, are very emotional about water rights and about water and the groundwater. But we did it. We started charging. The lawsuits started happening. And at the end of it, in 2008, we lost a big Prop 218 related lawsuit and ended up having to pay back $11 million in over-collected fees. Now, that same lawsuit is being contested in a different area in California, and the Supreme Court's going to have to review it because no one's really sure whether water rates should be subject to 218 the state proposition or not. So the funding part of all of this continues to be a real challenge. In the middle of all of that, our annual budget was $10 million, and we're repaying $11 million. An amazing partnership developed. We had received a $20 million Title 16 Bureau of Reclamation federal grant to build a recycling plant in Watsonville. And gutsy people, the city of Watsonville City Council, while we were on the verge of bankruptcy, stepped up and said, sure, why not loan you $35 million? It makes perfect sense. So, I mean, it's really visionary, and it really takes guts and keep being flexible, but keeping the eye on the prize, that there are all of you know there are things that are right, and your right might not be the same right as the person next to you, but getting together and making these partnerships happen, it's resulted in a tremendous success for us. We started delivering recycled water for agricultural irrigation in 2009 and have delivered over 20,000 acre feet now of recycled water to water the coastal crops that we grow in that valley. So the whole engaging the stakeholder thing, I know all of you have had to shake the Etch-a-Sketch a time or two. So did we in the Pajaro Valley, and it's resulted in some really great learning experiences, and now I think partnerships and collaboration that is unprecedented and is a model around the state. So I'm proud of all of us. I'm proud of all of you that are involved in water and are public servants, because it's a tough job, but it's a very rewarding job. And I think that's all I had to say. So thank you very much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Mary. We have a little time for just sort of some discussion between the panelists, and I think each of you did a good job of laying out something that you think should be done. What are the biggest hurdles? When you laid out what you thought needed to be done in your district or in the region, what do you think the biggest hurdles are to accomplishing what you laid out?
I think it's still the old attitude of mine and yours, and truly, not kind of just saying it, but we can't help. It's, you know, it goes jurisdictionally. Where is my boundary? All of us, when we were walking around here, we were kind of, okay, where's my home? Where's my street? Then there, the next, where's my city? Where is my boundary? Where is my basin? And I think it's really important once we're going to start thinking, acting outside of that realm, that it's ours. It's all ours, you know, going back to that water cycle, that it leaves here, it comes back maybe here or someplace else, so it's all shared. And what I see happening in Scotts Valley to extent and all throughout the county is a kind of parochial, mine and yours, and whatever that means, like Mary said, you know, somebody's right, somebody else is wrong. But that is a challenge still at this point on all levels. And it's going to take work, but I kind of see it's cracking a little bit. So there's direction and hope, and we need everybody kind of in that boat and feeling and thinking this way.
Well, one of the foundation's main roles, as I mentioned, is to try to bring in funding.
You might need to get just a little closer. I think it's. Yeah.
I was just saying, one of the main purposes of the foundation is to try to bring funding in for projects. And to me, from a very practical standpoint, trying to do that work through a grant-funded process is a tremendous hurdle. We have the IRWM plan that I mentioned that has a list of 80 or so projects that have been submitted from agencies, well in excess of, into the hundreds of millions in terms of the overall project cost. As Secretary Laird mentioned, we were recently awarded a $1.2 million grant from the Department of Water Resources, and we were thrilled to receive that grant. But the amount of funding to tackle all of the projects that deservingly need to get done in the region, I think remains a large obstacle.
I think the funding is a key issue, and I guess I'd say the funding for sort of the bread and butter work that needs to be done on a lot of projects to identify sites, to do the background work. In the research realm, we're typically not supported by grants to write proposals for grants. It's not usually allowed, and yet there's a big investment that takes place when you're trying to build capacity to do these projects. And I guess the other side of it is figuring out ways with these projects to share the costs appropriately and then share the benefits. And I think I remember being here in the mid-90s and hearing concerns in South County about, well, why do we in the back of the basin need to pay for problems in this other part of the basin where the seawater is coming in? And I think one of the keys to cracking that is getting people to recognize and appreciate that it's one basin, as Perret is describing, one water, but also figuring out ways to do projects that can spread the benefits, find multiple winners, benefit surface water and groundwater, benefit water quantity and water supply, quantity and quality. So finding those ways that the advantages of a particular solution can be shown to help multiple people often helps to clear the hurdles of resistance to those projects.
I think another thing for us has been getting everyone's level of understanding of the science, the technical background. When you have a room full of people and 3 or 4 of them are talking about their water coming from the Sierras, through these underground rivers or something, we realized then that we had to do some work, and we started having brown bag lunches and having people like Dr. Andy come and others to USGS is real involved in our area, but getting everyone's level of understanding of the technical problem, the technical basis to groundwater management was huge for us. And just as Dr. Fisher said, when you think that your pumping in the back of the basin isn't affecting someone that's down at the seawater intrusion front, there's a lot of work that has to be done to get everyone to realize that we all have skin in the game. We've all got to solve this together collaboratively.
That's great. You can all help me with a handout sheet for all the people that ask me why we can't just build a pipe from Boston and get the snow, which I get all the time. And I think you laid out some very good, things we have to do and dealt with the hurdles. How do you get the public involved? Because as I saw on planning issues that weren't water issues at the local level, if you went ahead with some process and it always had 20 people in it and you were going to make some final decision, that's generally when everybody would come out to a hearing. How do you make sure you get the public involved in those things that you're not in that circumstance?
They're here today, so let's start. It's actually interesting. That's one discipline that did not exist in the public utility realm. None of us had a PR person or marketing department, because it's like, why do you need that? You need engineers, you need customer service people. That's kind of where it ended, and then we added, you needed conservation specialists, you needed a watershed specialist. Marketing and community outreach came way after that. So we kind of did not do a very good job with that, because we did not know how important that was, to make sure that when we talk, we actually talk in a language that the people around us understand. So that's something we're catching up. I think tonight is an excellent example of what we're trying to do. But each of us, we have now websites. We are actually welcoming people to come and ask us questions and tell us what they think, because more heads is always better, and ultimately a great solution will come out of a bunch of good ones.
I agree with Perret, and I think that particularly within the IRWM program, it's relatively new within the last decade or so, and so really we're building upon the efforts that the agencies have in place. There was an outreach process specific throughout the IRWM plan development. It's required. but it's something that we are continually trying to improve upon. There's a website, hopefully many of you saw that associated with tonight's event, but I think it's a work in progress.
I can't say much about how these guys run their programs. I'm sort of on the other side in a way. I see a lot of these events. There's too many to go to, all of them, it seems like sometimes. But they need to keep happening. We need the events. I guess it's a little bit like sometimes I teach a class one year and then I do it again the next year and I think, why do I have to say this? I said it last year. And of course it's because it's not the same people. And so we have to be reminded that these events are part of the solution. They're not just an extra thing that's a burden or takes resources. This is it. The communication and the engagement is the solution. And so if it can get baked in as the projects are being built, then we have a better chance of being successful.
What we did, we knew how to do it wrong, so then we had to figure out how to do it right. In 2008, we formed one of these committees where our board kind of shook the etch of sketch and said, okay, we need to get the engineers out from in front of the room and put them way in the back. We need to get stakeholders in, and we went and drug them in kicking and screaming, not trusting the process. It was developing this trust, and as hard as it was for all of us who knew the answers and knew the right, we had it all figured out, we stepped back and said, okay, we give up, we don't. And we're going under, so you guys figure it out, and then we'll get the engineers in. And we did that. Everyone got a seat at the table, and they were appointed. Committees as big as 20, which made me almost have nervous breakdown. But 20 people on a committee, not all friends, but all with a seat with their name on it and their little binder with their name on it. And it was amazing how we got them up to kind of a technical level, and then how they bought into it and came to we had almost 100% attendance at these meetings. It went on for a couple years, at least once a month, some twice a month. I mean, it was amazing commitment once they realized they were going to be listened to. And I know you all have had similar experiences, but it was remarkable. It's giving me goosebumps, honestly. It was remarkable to go through that process. And John Ricker and others in the room were involved in a lot of this, and it worked out really well for us, but it took us quite a bit of time and a lot of money and lawsuits and what have you to get to the point that we figured it out.
We're just about out of time, but I was going to ask one more quick question, and you just actually started to give an answer to it, which is sort of just as a closing question. What makes you optimistic right now? What makes you think that we actually are going to deal with some of these in a way that's really constructive to get to a sustainable water supply in the county? Providing any of you have any optimism.
Well, I have to say that the water world just getting a chance to work, to get a bite of it, and the more I work and solve problems in this industry, I realize how much more is what I don't know. But it's so essential, and it touches all of us. And that for me is, we're not going to give up on that. I mean, we know we can't. And actually seeing more people being involved, that is for me a great thing, that my board meetings are not just me and the board. And more young people, that's another thing that I'd like to see, because, like Dr. Fisher said, we tell it once, we tell it twice, but also I'd like to get younger folks excited about this, excited about careers in the water industry, excited about what we do, excited about how they can be part of it and involved.
I think that the increasing level of coordination amongst the agencies that's apparent, particularly in this region, is a reason to be optimistic. I think perhaps more so than ever before, the amount of interaction and the realization of the benefits of working together on these regions is cause to be optimistic.
I'll follow up on something Perret said, which is that many of us who work in this general area, to some degree, followed our hearts as much as our heads into this kind of work. It's just interesting to us, and we feel like it's important, and it's valuable, and it's possible. Although the problems are large, you can see progress incrementally, year by year, project by project. And so, I think maybe that optimism comes with the nature of the work. But I find in talking to people about the different projects and talking to agency staff and talking to stakeholders, their eyes will light up with the ideas of how we can make things better. And the optimism comes from that feedback from the people who are affected by the work.
This might be heresy, but I am very optimistic, and in some ways, I think the drought was a blessing. And I think that because as much of a miracle worker as I think Secretary Laird is, I don't know how this groundwater legislation would have been passed without it. And with the drought, I know in the Pajaro Valley, people who had a very kind of one-sided attitude toward pumping groundwater have a whole new appreciation now. I don't think there's any farmer or irrigator in the Pajaro Valley who turns a well on that isn't really conscious of what the effects of that is and wondering, looking at the sky, when are we going to get these rains again? I think it's been a game changer, and this room full of people, I think, demonstrates that.
Please join me in thanking our panel for a great discussion.
So you've been very patient, sitting and listening for quite a while. Now we'd like you to get up and visit the stations that are around the room. There are 6 stations, one on water recycling, another on groundwater recharge and stormwater management, water system interties and water exchange, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, water conservation, and fish and water supply and watershed management. There are staff at each one of these stations to tell you a little bit about what's going on and for you to be able to ask questions. I'll be coming up here about every 10 minutes to let you know it's 10 minutes, and so move on and try to make it to as many as you can. But I want to thank our keynote speaker, John Laird, for coming here tonight. John Ricker for his ongoing work on the county water resources. The members of our panel. And I especially want to thank Rachel Christopher from my office, Deborah Means from the LAFCO office, and Sierra Ryan from the County Water Resources office, who did a lot of the groundwork to help make tonight possible. And thank you to all the water agencies who participated, and thank you all for coming out. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much.
I